This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pm-podcast.com or send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 168. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast. Nice to have you with us. Have you ever wondered what the formal definition of a project is? Or what the main elements of a project charter should be? How software can assist you in project management? What you should include as part of your project management planning toolkit if there are times when the baseline doesn't refer to the complete project plan? What the most effective group creativity techniques are in eliciting requirements? Or what the best way is to avoid scope creep? I could go on and on and on with questions like these because I have a copy of the Project Management Answer Book written by Jeff Furman. It's full of questions and answers like these. Jeff intended and wrote this book as an easy-to-use Q&A reference that explains key project management concepts in bite-sized pieces, including hundreds of hands-on tips and best practices for us project managers. He included diagrams, study aids, and top 10 lists to help project managers prepare for the PMP exam and related certifications. This episode is sponsored by Wrike. How do you keep your team up to date on all projects? Wrike's social project management software helps thousands of managers worldwide organize their project data in one spot and ensures seamless collaboration of their employees. With Wrike, collaborating on multiple projects is as easy as navigating a social network. Keep your team members on the same page. Collaborate twice as efficiently as you did before. Start a free trial today at wrike.com. Back to the Project Management Answer Book. In his foreword, Andy Crow says the following about the book. The Project Management Answer Book covers an amazing breadth of topics. The advice it offers is concise and straightforward. It's brimming with wisdom from someone who faced these questions in the real world and has sifted through the various theories and practices to find what works. Would you like to win a copy? That's easy. As always, we are giving away 2 copies, and one of these 2 is reserved for our paying premium podcast listeners, and 1 copy is up for grabs for everybody. All you have to do is go to facebook.com/pmpodcast, find the notice about the book giveaway, and leave a comment. We will draw the winners around the 9th of February 2011, so make sure you stop by before then. Jeff Furman has 15 years of experience as an IT project manager for Fortune 500 financial companies in the New York City area, where he managed many software evaluations and implementations, QA testing projects, and the development and support of a software change management system for a large brokerage in Manhattan, which was used 24/7 for many years by more than 1,000 developers concurrently. He is also a highly experienced technical trainer, and for the last 4 years has been teaching a popular PMP prep course and has trained more than 500 project managers. He also teaches an advanced Train the Trainer course, helping many instructors sharpen their presentation skills and become CompTIA certified trainers and Microsoft certified trainers. He has published articles on a wide range of topics, from PMP to risk management to Y2K to IT vendor tools, as well as interviews with singer-songwriters for New Jersey's daily newspaper, the Bergen Record. And now, got any questions? Because Jeff's got the answers. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview. Today with Jeff Furman, author of the Project Management Answer Book and PMP instructor.
Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Hi, Cornelius. Nice to be here.
You are the author of the Project Management Answer Book. How would you summarize this book?
Well, the book has a double purpose. I've had a dual career as both an IT project manager for many years and also as a PMP instructor. And so the book has two purposes. Number one is it's a very detailed practitioner's guide for PMs with a lot of hands-on tips and best practices. That was the primary goal, but it's also very much to help PMs toward the PMP and the CAPM. I teach quite a bit, and so I'm very immersed in helping people toward the test as well.
Yeah, it's called the Answer Book. Does that mean that, it's in the question and answer style?
Yeah, first of all, there was no PMP book in Q&A style for the current PMBOK, so that was part of the idea. We saw a need. Also, I find people really like the Q&A format. It's very easy to read and very easy to navigate. And also, I like it a lot because it goes with my teaching style. I like to break concepts down into bite-sized chunks, and Q&A is perfect for that in book form.
Okay, so if we have a question and an answer, I have to ask the question about the questions. Who asked all of these questions that are in there?
Well, that's a good question. I've counted up about 500 project managers in my classes. So I've had literally so many questions over the years. And so literally a lot of these questions are frequently asked questions by my students. Also, some of the questions came from my editors. They would say, how about another Q&A here, or maybe a sidebar? So some of them were suggestions from my editor in the process. And some of them were, I thought, what's a good way to take this chunk from the PMBOK, let's say an earned value formula, that sort of thing, and break it down into very nice bite-sized pieces for the reader.
I assume the answers then came from you, right?
Yeah, they came from me, but it's a very heavily researched book. I wrote the book constantly with about 5 or 6 project management books on my desk, some that you've heard of, Andy Crow and Rita Mulcahy and the PMBOK and Green and Stellman book. So anything that I wanted to verify, I kind of did quite a lot of verifying to make sure all my facts were good. And also the publisher Management Concepts, they do quite a lot of project management books. So
Yes.
They have a very thorough process as well. The editing process takes a couple of months.
And how many questions are in the book?
Well, there are exactly 518.
Okay.
I counted them for you.
So in essence, this is a project management FAQ, right?
Well, it's an FAQ, but it's also really a textbook and a practitioner's guide. So a lot of it is frequently asked questions, but a lot of it is what would be the text that I can put into Q&A form to help people learn the stuff, to help them toward the test.
You gave me an advanced copy and I looked through it, and I have to tell you that I find that some of these questions are rather basic, like what's the PMBOK guide and what job titles might I have as a project manager, or what is gold plating? Is the book for beginners?
Well, they're basic when you know the answer. People will have an expectation that an answer book is extremely thorough and comprehensive. So it does have the basics, but it also goes into more and more advanced topics as well. So I try to kind of cover everything, especially with the typical reader being a student who's going for the PMP. I tried to also have a lot of advanced topics, everything I could include. I think every chapter has advanced topics also for the more senior PMs. So I go into some things like Gold's rate, and there's something called the value triple constraint from Angelo Barata, and I have some stuff about Agile. So I also try to make it advanced as well.
How do you envision that senior project management practitioners use the book?
Well, I think for them, they can quickly go through the Q&As and see, here's something I need to know that I don't know about, and maybe I know a little, but here I can see there's a lot of detail that'll help me. Also, senior people might want to go, maybe they studied PMBOK 2 or 3, and my book will bring them totally up to speed on PMBOK 4.
Okay, that works for me. What we want to do now is we want to go and open up the book and go through your personal favorite questions here that you've sent to me directly from the book. So what we'll do is I'll ask the question, and you can then go ahead and elaborate on these questions and tell us what the answers would be that people find in the book. The first one that you have selected comes from the quality management chapter. Question number 4. How did Crosby express cost of quality as something that can be calculated? And how is this formula useful to project managers today?
Well, I like this one a lot because I hadn't seen it in the PMP books that I read. And I was very impressed that he could put this, it's kind of an out-of-the-box thing to make a formula in this way. So he said that the cost of quality really could be put into a formula. He talks a lot in his book. He has a book called Quality is Free, and he talks a lot about how people think of quality as kind of elusive, but really you can break it down into numbers and you can have a much more successful project. So this was the crux of that, was his formula, where he said there are really 3 components to the cost of quality: prevention costs plus appraisal costs plus failure costs. And an example of this, everyone knows all about the BP oil spill. If you think of that example and you think of this formula, when you're cutting quality, it hurts you in the end. So if you think in advance, this is something project managers can do. They can think in advance, how much money should I spend on prevention costs? How much money should I spend on appraisal costs to make sure that my processes are good? And if I don't do a good enough job, I'm going to have failure costs. So an example of the BP oil spill, it's a gigantic example of failure costs, where the failure is costing billions, which largely all could have been prevented had they done more prevention and appraisal. So I like this formula. In a sense, you would like the cost of quality to be 0. In other words, it's all of the extraneous costs. Or in other words, as he called it, you probably know the expression, the cost of nonconformance. But in other words, all of the things that you're doing to make sure you have quality besides creating the product. And if you do all of those things well, you'll have very good quality for your customer.
Let me ask you a follow-up question here. Does he also factor the loss of customer goodwill into the cost of quality?
Yeah. It's fun to read his book, Quality is Free, because each of these 3 points he really breaks down into a lot of pieces. So he has things like, he has an expression called service after service, when you have to do more work for free to make up for an error. All of those things, everything you could think of. In other words, money you have to spend trying to get back customers' goodwill. What if there's a lawsuit? All the money there, a new marketing campaign. So people are often very short-sighted. They try to do things on the cheap, and they don't factor in exactly those things, which really can be way more expensive than just building the product itself.
All right. Your next question that you have selected dovetails nicely into something that you've already mentioned. That's the BP oil spill. And the question also comes from the quality management chapter. What are the most useful lessons in quality control we can take from some of the biggest recent scandals in the business world?
Well, yeah, this is a fun topic because people know about these stories from the news, and they're kind of juicy stories. So it's nice when you're teaching this stuff because people have an interest already. For instance, the BP scandal, the Toyota accelerator scandal. There was a very interesting one. Anyone who has a pet would be very aware of this. I'm not sure if you know, there was a case of melamine poisoning. Do you know about that?
No, I haven't heard of that.
As part of outsourcing, and so the point of it is, how do you maintain quality when you're saving money by outsourcing? This was a mistake that was made, and a lot of American pet food companies, all of a sudden, they all outsourced production to a foreign country. So they're producing the pet food over in a foreign country, which is really their flagship product. And so it's a very dangerous thing to mess with your main product. But all of the big pet food companies, they had outsourced production of the pet food overseas, and somehow overseas, even though they followed the same quality test procedures, something went extremely wrong. All of a sudden, a chemical called melamine was being added to the pet food, and this is a very bad poison for cats and dogs. And it wasn't malicious. It wasn't with the intent of hurting the cats and dogs, but it was actually a way of cheating on the protein count. So in other words, instead of adding good protein to pet food, if you add a little bit of this cheap chemical called melamine, it raises artificially the protein count. So this was a very unusual situation. The pet food was all tainted. It was intentional, but not to hurt the pets. But it was an example of quality control gone bad. And it raises the point that when you're going to outsource and maybe save a lot of money, I would say it's a good lesson learned to put a little extra money into more quality control in this kind of way. In other words, don't just do the same tests and say, okay, the test match as like in America, the test match over there, so we don't have to worry. When you outsource to avoid things like this, you really have to go the extra mile, look closer at the creation of the product, that kind of thing.
All right. Question number 3 you selected comes from the Communications Management chapter, and I actually like this quite a bit, this particular question here. It is as follows. What is emotional intelligence, and how is it related to listening skills?
Yeah, emotional intelligence, people hear about it, and I think the very interesting thing about it is I find that people feel it's something that you have or you don't, that it's not really teachable. But I think it is very teachable, and it is really a very big asset for project managers to have. The higher their emotional intelligence, the better decisions they make, the better they deal with other people and their stakeholders and their team. So in my book, I give an example of a little exercise that can help people kind of try to test their emotional intelligence and see that it's something that they might want to work on. It's connected to listening skills, where I have a grid showing some of the paralingual voice qualities that you hear in the PMI books about listening skills, like someone's voice, their volume, their tone, their pitch, all that kind of thing. But I show it as an exercise. You could have someone take a look at this list and then see what would you add to the list. So suppose you were going to add 5 more listening skills to this list. It's sort of a way to train and try to see an area where you want to improve.
We're moving on to question number 4. You selected this one from the Leadership Skills for Project Managers, something that many of my listeners here are interested in. The question is, what is the who gets it next attitude on a project team? And then you have a related question, what is the red ink syndrome? So what are the answers to these 2 questions?
Yeah, from being an IT manager for many years, I've noticed some behaviors over the years that I haven't seen per se in any of the books, and they're very destructive practices. So I thought it helps people. It's kind of an advanced thing to look at, but these are patterns that I've noticed more than once. The who gets it next attitude is that I've seen in certain teams, there's always an attitude. It's a little bit like on the Donald Trump The Apprentice, where there's always, who can we get next? Maybe we'll get rid of one more team member. And there's sort of an attitude, there's one bad performer. If we can work on getting rid of them, then we'll improve our team. And then as soon as that's been done, they sort of say, okay, things still aren't good. Let's now look who would be the next one. And I think this is about the opposite way that you want to manage. You want to be trying to improve in a much more positive way, training your team and building up your team. But yet I've seen this behavior. And a similar behavior, which I call the red ink syndrome, this is a bad behavior where red ink meaning someone may be jealous or they may be 2 competing people on a team. So one of them literally acts like the other one shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be getting their paycheck. And I've also seen this on a larger level where one department or team literally will be shunning the other team. They'll be acting like we are the good ones, they're the bad ones, and it's very counterproductive. I've seen this when there's been a corporate merger where there are 2 teams and maybe one thinks it's only going to be one team standing. So I call this the red ink syndrome just as a way of calling attention to it. And this is something where you really need senior leadership to step in and fix it. If a project manager sees this and can't fix it themselves, this is very serious, and he needs to go and get senior level support in this kind of situation.
We're moving on to the risk management chapter in your book, and this is your question number 5 here. What is the purpose of the field in the risk register, project or company's strength for handling the risk? And how is it used by some companies? You know, when I first read this question, I had to read it 2 or 3 times to even understand what the question asks. So maybe you can start by elaborating what the question is actually asking.
Yeah, the typical way that you see in a PMP book, the formula for qualitative risk analysis, it's P times I, where it's probability on a scale of 1 to 10 times impact on a scale of 1 to 10. And so you typically see a little formula P times I, where the biggest qualitative risk could be 100, which would be 10 times 10. One of the companies that I teach at frequently in Texas, they do a lot of risk management. They're actually involved with offshore oil drilling, and they added a third field to their equation, and it works very well for them. So it's a little bit like from SWOT analysis. So they add a field called S for strength, just like on a SWOT diagram. They multiply probability times impact times, really the crux of the matter is, what is our company's strength at handling a given risk? Because you could say that it's not the size of the risk that matters as much as our company's ability to handle that risk. So this was just a variation on the qualitative formula where they do P times I times S. Each one could be on a scale of 1 to 5. So for them, the maximum would be 5 times 5 times 5, 125.
I see. So they added a third field to that particular formula to adapt the formula to how they could internally handle all these risks.
Yeah, and I think it's quite an improvement. It's a very good formula, the way they do it, that I think other people can take advantage of.
Yes, I have to admit, I've never heard of this before, and it makes complete sense because some risks you are able to manage better and some risks you're able to manage worse as a company, depending on what strengths you have. Makes complete sense. All right. Question number 6. We're moving on to the PMP exam, but all those of you who are already PMPs, don't worry, because this is a very interesting question. And based on this question, Jeff and I have selected to do a second interview that is completely focusing on this particular area here. And it's all about ethics. And the question is as follows. Are there any special recommendations regarding the ethics-based questions?
It's a funny thing, but many students, they are a little afraid of the ethics questions, and many students initially don't do well on ethics. They'll be very good with more of the hard skills like the math formulas, but ethics is a problem for many students, and I think this is why PMI is very big on pushing ethics and making it important. You really want to have ethical project managers to have successful projects. So first of all, a common pitfall that I have noticed a lot, students try to second guess the ethics questions. They try to think, I wouldn't really do this in the real world, but I'm going to do what I think the PMP test is asking me. And I think this is, first of all, it usually fails more than succeeds. Almost every student who tries to do that, when we're in our class doing practice questions, they'll get it wrong by trying to sort of outthink the question. So I think that a recommendation should be, really, what do you think is the most ethical answer here, period? In other words, don't second guess it. What do you consider the most ethical choice? And I also, this is the idea behind PMI including ethical questions on their tests. They want you to be as ethical as possible, so they ask these kind of questions partly to train you to think ethically.
Right. And we also have to mention at this point that some of the ethics questions on the exam, they are, they don't start out with, this is an ethics question, right? So it doesn't actually, it's not often visible that you are working on an ethics question.
Yeah, ethics is, instead of saying there's a pure subject called ethics, every day project managers are making a lot of decisions where ethics factors in, and the better ethical point of view you have, the better decision you can make. That is the idea.
Yes, exactly. There's also a change happening to the PMP exam coming up in August 2011, where ethics is no longer treated as a separate topic. It is now part of the 5 major process groups, right?
Yeah, so I'm glad we talked about this. So in other words, there used to be this kind of 6th process group, ethics, on the test. But really, that was kind of a false construct because ethics is part of everything that a project manager does. So they've really just made the test more like reality. They're saying, here's a question about what should the project manager do. They're not calling it ethics, but they're saying, what should you do? And they're going to be interspersing questions on ethics really throughout the test, starting at the end of August of this year. And just by the way, there was a false rumor about this, so to make sure no one has disinformation, the PMBOK is not changing in August of this year, but people, as soon as they heard about the ethics question change, they started a rumor that there's a new PMBOK in August, but that is not true. The new PMBOK won't be until next year, which is 2012.
Yes, and as I have mentioned, we are going to do a second interview in just a moment here, Jeff and I, and in this interview, we are going to look at ethics in project management in more detail. Jeff, the book is called, as a reminder to everybody, the Project Management Answer Book, written by Jeff Furman, PMP, and it is published by Management Concepts. Where can our listeners go and learn more about this book?
Yeah, my website is jeff-furman.com, and the book website is pmanswerbook.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was Jeff Furman with some of the answers from his Project Management Answer Book. Remember, if you are a paying premium subscriber, you are automatically entered into our book giveaway. If you are a free listener, on the other hand, well then stop by at facebook.com/pmpodcast and leave a comment in the book giveaway here for the Project Management Answer Book. Do that before the 9th of February 2011. Good luck. Also, after we were done with this interview here, I asked Jeff one more question. So keep listening to the very, very end of today's episode, and you'll hear him talk about the largest projects he's ever managed. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PMP or PGMP and you're looking for a simple and effective way to earn your PDUs, then try our sister podcast, the PDU Podcast. Earning your PDUs can be as simple as watching a podcast webinar. Get new webinars and at least one new PDU every month on autopilot. Stop by at pducast.com. That's pducast.com. Please send your emails to info@pmpodcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Don't think of it as procrastination. Think of it as just-in-time project management. Until next time. One more question for you, Jeff. What was the largest project that you have ever managed?
Well, I worked on a very large system. I worked for a large brokerage in Manhattan that had no change management process at all for their IT software. Things were very loose, and programmers could put in new programs or updates kind of willy-nilly. We were tasked with putting in a change management system for really an entire company, like 1,000 developers, 24/7. It was really such a big change. So it was a very large project. And it was a funny situation because the programmers, even though they care very much about quality, they were very much resisting this system, which the point of it was quality. So we prevailed here because we were able to show them the benefits. But the point of it really largely that I mention about this in my book is when you're trying to get people to adjust to change, it really is good to go with the what's in it for me approach, WIFM. And when we showed the developers how this system would make their life easier, that's when they finally embraced the system. We would say to them, suppose you have to back out 50 changes in the middle of the night. Would you want to scramble around looking for all of them, or would you rather just type in a B essentially and back everything out and bring the old code back in? So this was a success story of persuading people by kind of appealing to their own interest.